Hello and welcome back to the interview with Russell Earl Magowan. This is part 7.
Yeah, that's right. I think the last I was just mentioning that Frank sold me his flatbed truck that he brought his possessions from Milwaukee to California in. Anyway, it was a real good truck, real nice in top condition, and so I bought it for $350. Oh, and by the way, about this time my daughter Joan Dee was born. So then, what was I going to do with the truck? Well, that accident that I mentioned earlier, I finally got a settlement on it. I got $3,000, and $3,000 at that time was quite a bit of money. And so I thought, well, I've got to give some thought to this. I'm not just going to spend it. I'm going to give some real thought. I want to go in business. I always did want to go in business. Maybe this is my opportunity. So I bought this truck, and I thought, well, I'll take $500 of the money, and I'll take the family, and we'll go on a trip around the United States in the truck. So we got some lawn chairs, and we put them up in the back. It was a flatbed with side rails on it, wood, and we put the lawn chairs up in there, a couple of them, and the kids all sat up there, and Lorraine, she drove the truck a lot, and I sat up there with the kids. And anyway, we went up toward, we were going to go back to New York and see my sister and maybe Washington, D.C., really tour the United States. So we took off, and we went up to Idaho and went to Malta, heading into Malta, and on the way into Malta, it was hot, it was in the summertime, and Russ, he was just a little boy. I think he was around 9, but I'm not sure. But anyway, we got about 2 miles from Malta, and sitting out there in the desert was about 4 or 5 Indians in their native garb, just sitting there in the sagebrush on rocks, I guess it was. Anyway, I stopped, and they wanted to ride on into Malta. A truck or something had broken down, and it had left them there. So they climbed up into the back of the truck, and Russ later told me he was scared to death of them Indians. I didn't know that. But anyway, we drove into Malta and let them off. And then the people in Malta who knew us well from living there, they treated us real nice. They took us to dinner, and one of them let Russell ride his horse, ride the horse, and he was out riding. And we had a good time there. And then we went on from there, and we went the northern route over, I think, to Grand Rapids, Michigan is where we were headed. We went across Lake Michigan with a truck. I put it on a ship, and it was a big one, and we stood up above and looked down and watched it being loaded down in the hold. And we went out. It was an overnight trip to go over to Grand Rapids from where we were. We were in, I forget, Milwaukee, somewhere up in there. Anyway, there was a storm. It was real rough, and there weren't any bunks or anything. We had to sleep on the floor or on cushions or whatever we could find, and all the other people did too. It wasn't a passenger ship. It was a freight for hauling. So when we got over there, they unloaded the truck, and we took off and went on down the Philadelphia Turnpike and went to see my sister. And we visited with her for a couple of days, I presume. And then we went on down to Washington, D.C., and saw all the buildings there, and the children got to see all that, which was fun. And then we took off and came back. But by the way, while we were traveling, my mind was working in regards to how I was going to spend the rest of the money in order to go into business. And I got the idea that I'll build a building in back of the house we live in. It was just a little house we were living in. We owned it now. And I only gave $2,500 for it when I bought it. And so anyway, on the back lot there was room for another building. And I thought, well, I'll build a shop there. And I'll build it so that later it can be expanded and we can have a rental. So that's what we did. And when we got back, I started building the shop to have radio and television service, because radio and television, particularly television, had just come in, and there weren't many television sets, but they were tubes in the sets, and the tubes naturally heat up, and they gave a lot of trouble. The original television set required a lot of service, almost all of them. There were very few of them that didn't require some service. So, and auto radios. So anyway, I hired a fella who was a captain in the fire department. He was a pretty good radio man. He knew how to repair them. And he came over and he worked on the bench, and he became a benchman, and I worked with him. And we began to get quite a few car radios. We were the only one in town. There wasn't anyone else to repair them. So we got all the business naturally. Then the television started coming, and I figured, well, I'll move uptown. So we went uptown, and I leased a building for a year. And I think the rent was only $50 a month, as I remember. And I had the sign painted outside, Newhall Radio and TV Service Company. And I built a nice, big, long bench in there. Then we started repairing TVs, and they became more and more popular. And then I started selling new ones. I had them up in the front of the store. And the business became real good, and I was doing good. And I bought a couple rentals. And I had a couple rentals. One of them was out in Hornby, a house there. I rented it to a soldier and his wife that worked up at the Nike base, and we got rent from that. And then the little shop that I'd moved out at in the back of our little house, I had that built with a bathroom and another room put on it, and a kitchen, and we made that into an apartment. I rented that. Then I rented the little house that we gave $2,500 for, which was our original domicile, while I was working at the Newhall airport. Anyway, business was real good, and I did that for about 5 years. I was in business for 5 years, and I had put up many, many antennas, and a lot of them were way high up in the mountains, because Newhall was a fringe area. And initially, TV, people didn't receive it if they were way back in the hills. They couldn't receive it at all. The only way they could get it was go way up on top of the hill, put an antenna, and run a line down. And we used open wire line, which had 1/6 the loss of the 300 ohm twin lead, which is normally used. And it looked like a ladder. It looked like a ladder. 2 wires with little insulators, a ladder. So I had a 4-wheel drive Army truck I bought, used, and I would go up and knock sagebrush down going up the hill. And before I'd go over to the local cafe, and the high school boys would be waiting because they knew I'd hire them. And I'd hire 3 or 4 young boys, 15, 16-year-old, and pay them $1.70 an hour. And I paid them at the end of the day, cash. So anyway, they would dig the holes and take the poles, which weren't poles really, they were railroad. They used them on the railroad, on boxcars, on the sides to hold things in, and I could buy them for $1 a piece at the local lumber yard, so I'd buy maybe 10 or 15 of them and put them on the truck, and we'd take them along with us with all the other equipment. And then I'd measure every 50 feet and say I want a pole there, and the guy started digging, and then I'd go down another 50 feet and then mark that, and he'd dig a hole there, and another guy'd be bringing a pole down, putting it in. And in one day, I think I made $1,200, believe it or not, total. It was really good money. It was honest money, but hard work. And maybe the run was 800 feet or 1,000 feet up to the top of the mountain down to the person's house. But they got TV when I had done it, and they were real thrilled to get that. Sometimes they'd only get 1 or 2 stations, but even that was better than nothing. Otherwise, they just got a bunch of snow, a real snowy picture, you could hardly see it. And that's what my business consisted of, putting up antennas and radio, house radios, car radios, and TV service. And so I'd hired men in New York. I'd put ads in New York and Chicago in the paper for technicians, and that's where my men came from. And I had about 4 men working for me, and they were all top men, and I gave them top pay, more than they would get at RCA. I paid $150 a week for RCA, paid $85 for their benchmen. So they were real happy, and they were good for business. They treated the customers well, and my business thrived.